The Wander and Reason Podcast. The crossroads of philosophy and practicality, where we explore such ideas with sincerity. And our intro music is as long as the intellectual dilemmas that we have debated eons upon eons in our heads.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Wander and Reason podcast. I'm your host, Zach Kuva, and I am excited to be back here for another episode. I have a bunch of things I want to get into today. Hope everybody's week is going well. Everyone got through this past episode of Game of Thrones. Only one more left, I'm sure. Many of you, like myself, are just kind of ready for this thing to run its course. It's been good. It's been great. It's been okay. But I'm ready. It's been a lot. So it was definitely an interesting way to start out this week. But it was kind of cool. You know, what's cool about it is that, you know, so many people are watching it that it's like that thing that everybody talks about. It's like when you're a little kid and the Super Bowl happens and then the next day everyone comes in and talks about whatever, you know, commercials or you know, the same kind of thing. You know, it's all anybody could talk about at the office was Game of Thrones and theories and all that stuff. That is the fun part of it, but I am just ready for this thing to to be done. But so anyway, so I hope everybody's week is going well. I did have some topics that I wanted to get into today. It is going to be a monologue episode. I'm hoping to have a guest probably within the next 2 months. So I know I'm putting a big time frame on that, but hopefully it will happen a little bit sooner. But we'll see as far as travel and all that. But that should be on the horizon sometime in the future. But for now, you're stuck with me. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, I kind of wanted to do two things. I wanted to talk about this thing that has been, I guess, affecting me in some sort of way, and it's kind of this difficult to describe, cloudy conceptual. I don't even know what it is, right? But it's a thing. It's this thing that's kind of been overshadowing myself. So I wanted to get into that a little bit and unpack that and talk about that. And then I did also want to take the time to read a quick excerpt from a very good book by a philosopher that I really respect, Alan Watts. And just take a look at what he's saying, because I think the two tie in together. They kind of also tie in together with some of the things that I talked about in this past episode, where I was, I was talking in a general sense of, the effect of careers and work and life and value systems based on material things. And it's an interesting thing. I don't know the exact date that the writing is from, but Alan Watts, very interesting, Western thinker, but kind of specialized in Eastern Buddhism, and really interesting guy. He was a professor. He used to be a member of the clergy at one point, and he has a ton of great lectures online that you can just find on YouTube, usually with some sort of dramatic music added to it by somebody, but those are out there. And then he has a lot of great books, and he was prominent in the 50s, 60s, 70s, so I don't know exactly when the excerpt that I'm going to read was written, but what's interesting about it, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, is kind of how it's still very relevant today, almost even more so, given the effect that social media has had on, I think, the reality of what it is to connect and the value systems that we have. So we'll get to that. But first, yes, this cloudy, looming thing that's been going on. It's it's that cloud from the Zoloft commercials. It's depression. Well, it's not depression. There's something going on, folks. And I don't think my experience is unique. So that's why I think it's relevant to bring up and maybe even just think through out loud on this podcast. And maybe, hopefully, some of you find that a little bit relatable. So one of the things, so after this, episode of Game of Thrones, it was, it was a big episode, right? So it was a whole thing. I ended up speaking to my dad right after it and talking about it, and talked to a couple friends, and that's the fun of the whole thing, right? So after all that occurs, typically, we all kind of have our routines for the weekend. For Sundays, for myself, I try to unwind. I sometimes I listen to a podcast. I try to read if I can to make my eyes a little bit tired. And in a perfect world, I'm asleep before midnight. Because I'm usually up the next day, at least by like 7 o'clock. I live pretty close to where I work, so it's not too difficult to get over there. So, what I found myself in a position where I've been before, on a Sunday night, where, I've laid in bed, I've gone through every step of my, patterns of behavior, brush my teeth, take my contacts, I, get everything all ready, things are ready for tomorrow, my cat's fed, and I'm listening to a little bit of a podcast, and I get overcome with this just sense of dread about the next day. And it's not an anxiety attack, but it's definitely like an anxious state of mind. And it's such, I don't even know how to describe it to people who haven't experienced it before, but probably the best way to, it's just a really dark, empty feeling, right? And I think I've talked to some close friends, and I know that experience isn't unique. But for me, it was this very real thing on Sunday evening. I ended up not being able to fall asleep, and it was almost 1:30 in the morning, and I think then I fell asleep, right? So, I woke up the next day, wasn't well rested, had to, get everything together for work and head to the office, and that whole morning, ritual and all of that. And I found myself on a weird loop this week where, I didn't get enough sleep. This anxiety caused me to not get sleep. I didn't get the sleep. The next day, I'm tired. I drink a lot of caffeine during the day. I'm talking 2-3 cups of coffee. So I get speedy during the day, but I'm sleep deprived. And then, I'm making bad decisions with like whatever I'm eating. I don't even know what I ate. I think I might have had like a frozen pizza or something shitty for dinner. And then it kind of just was this thing that continued, right? So it's just, because I took all that caffeine, even though I was exhausted, I still couldn't sleep, and then that kept me up again on Tuesday night, and tonight's Tuesday night, so on Monday night it kept me up, but it compounded, right? And so here I am. It is Tuesday night now. That I'm recording this, and I've had a few nights back to back. The sleep has been horrible. Each night I've had that anxiety, and then kind of during the day, during even just my day at work, while I'm trying to accomplish things, and there's things I have to do. There's phone calls I'm making, and I'm doing these things. I have to make emails. I have to drive to places and visit people, and those are all things that I'm doing. But there's just this sense of numbness to it all, and And I'm trying to just place what that is, right? So where is that coming from? Is it depression? Is it just like, yes, this is depression and that's what it is? Or is it something that is something that's chemical that is just I'm predisposed to? Or is it something that, yeah, you didn't get enough sleep, you have been eating like shit, you are over caffeinated, and you're over caffeinating yourself that is sleep deprived. And so, like, is it the compounding of all of that is causing that? Or is it everything? Is it the chemical things and all of that? This kind of like stew of just mental, I don't even know what you would, just like a fucking shit stew. It's like been a shit stew this week. So what is that? And like, where does that come from? Because the anxiety for myself doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense about the next day, because I don't work in a coal mine. Hey, working in a coal mine might be fucking great and awesome. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't have a job that's particularly difficult. It's not horrible. I do have a fair amount of autonomy. I've talked about the importance of autonomy and reclaiming your life and reclaiming your independence. But I'm fortunate that even though I do work for a company in an industry that it's just a job, right? I do well in it, but I'm lucky in the sense that I have a fair amount of freedom. So it's not that like I'm like stressed because I have to get somewhere and I'm clocking in and there's this micromanaged vibe that's going on, because I have a lot of freedom. I make my schedule. I have things I have to get done. I make my schedule though, and that's not what it is. And so I've just been trying to pinpoint it, and what's easy, what's difficult to do is trying to pinpoint it while I'm like experiencing it, because like I'm still kind of in that like that mind state, I guess. I don't want to overuse that throughout this podcast, but I've been in that kind of mental place, and it's difficult to analyze why I'm in that place while I'm in it. So that's part of the issue. But I don't really know how to go about tackling this thing. And one of the things that, like, when I was like, I'm going to come up with this thing, it's going to be called Wander and Reason. I'm going to get into this. I'm going to write, blogs, but I don't really want to follow a blog format. So I want to kind of do it in a weird way. And I'm going to do a podcast because podcasts are awesome. And it kind of is just this raw and filtered, way of expressing yourself. So that's cool too. And I kind of like the marriage of both of those on the same platform. And it's going to be this cool creative endeavor that I'm going to do for myself. Well, the backdrop of all of that is that I've been kind of trying to deal with a thing going on. And you know what? From the outside, it's like, it's your midlife crisis, dude. It's obviously, that's what it is. It's some sort of crisis. I don't know if it's like the stereotypical midlife crisis, because I don't know if I'm in that type of a position. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I've been trying to deal with this thing, and so it's like part of the idea of coming out with all of this stuff has been, let me just explore it while it's going on. Let me blog about things. Let me talk about things on a podcast and have it be really authentic, because it's real things that are going on that are affecting me that I'm trying to figure out. And I'm also trying to rise above and potentially leave with some sort of positive message for myself, and maybe that will translate to a positive message for other people. Or, maybe through doing this, I'll get some comments or some feedback or some dialogue with people that maybe have started to follow things, and maybe that will push me in an interesting direction or expose me to new ideas I haven't heard of before. So that's been kind of the idea behind this whole thing, right? So kind of back to what I'm saying, this state though, it's like a state of numbness. And I know something about myself because a little bit about my life. I've lived in a lot of different places. Since I graduated college, I don't know if I've had like 8 different apartments, and I'm 29. I'm not that old, right? That's a fair amount to have, between the whatever it was, 9 years since I graduated college, right? So, I've lived in Boston, I've lived in upstate New York, I've lived in 2 different areas of Pennsylvania. I moved overseas. I lived in Vietnam and taught English for a year. I now live in Arizona. And so a lot of those moves have been like larger moves where I've completely hit the reset button, and I've moved to a different city, did not know a single person. And so I find myself in that situation now. I've been in Arizona just about a year. And it's always about like a year and a half into wherever I'm at, where I start to get that itch where it's like, you need to do something, dude. You need to pick up and make something happen. And so that's its own thing to unpack, and I'm sure I'll do that at some point. But I guess the larger point is that I'm in a city where I haven't done the best job of pushing myself to. I've done things, and obviously, like I mentioned in the last episode, kind of about like Instagram or whatever, I've curated my pictures, right, to show me hiking and I'm out west and there's cactuses and all that shit. So that's a glamorized viewpoint, picture of it, a snapshot of it. But the reality of what it is I go to work, I come home. Most of my social interaction comes from my job. I don't have friends that exist in the city outside of the coworkers that I have, and I'm lucky that I get along really well with my boss, and sometimes I'll hang outside of work with him because we do some outdoor stuff. But he has 4 kids and a wife and a family and a whole busy life, right? Where I just don't. So I get out and I come back and I just kind of have my time to myself. And so one of the criticisms that I've had of myself is that like I'm trying to get too much. I'm expecting too much out of my day, out of my work day, in the sense that it's not like I just view it as like, oh, this is where I'm just doing my job and this is where I make my money. It's like, for me, it also is like my only social interaction, and I like tend to like when it doesn't deliver in certain ways that I want it to, then it's kind of like the hits harder. You know what I mean? Like there's more of an urgency for me to like have work be all of these things, because I haven't created a life outside of my job that has really been really well-rounded. I don't have a group of friends to hang out with. I have wonderful friends that I'm really close with, and they live in like 3 different states on 3 different corners of the U.S. And so it just makes it hard, right? It's hard when you have type friends that you're close with, but like you live in a city that's far away. It would be a big trip to have to see each other. And then kind of like you've already made like really good friends that know you really well and you talk to a decent amount. And so you kind of just don't seek out the depth of relationship and like meeting new friends. And this is just like a weird thing to meet new friends when you're a guy. I have felt weird. I don't know. It's just like, what am I going to do? Go to a bar and be like, hey, what's up, guys? Like, hey, like intrude on someone's conversation. So I don't know. So it's I've thought about doing like the meetup group thing and all of that. And it just seems kind of lame. I don't know. I'm being a hater on it, and I probably just needs to put put myself, I need to experiment with it. I need to treat it like it's a scientific experiment. And like, I'm going to just make this micro adjustment here. I'm going to go to this one thing. If it sucks, it sucks. Like, whatever, I'll just bounce. It doesn't matter. But if it doesn't, like, hey, maybe I'll have this cool interaction that I wouldn't have. Regardless, my larger point is that I'm probably demanding too much from my like work life. I'm demanding that to be this big significant thing in my life outside of my job, because right now it has to be like everything for me, and that's not realistic. And so why the sense of dread, right? So going back to what I was originally saying, I have this anxiety, and then kind of like I feel like I've like almost been like sleepwalking through the weeks in this like numb state, and I've carried that, through the weekends and been kind of disconnected, and I maybe, you know what, maybe that is that crisis, right? That I hate to call it a midlife crisis. I'm like, am I at my midlife point? But you know what, it probably is realistic, right? So how do we cope with that sense of dread? I mean, why is the dread happening in the first place? I think I tend to carry a fair amount of stress. And I know that experience is not unique to me. I know a lot of people that have stressful jobs. I talk to some friends that truly hate their careers. I don't hate mine. I'll probably be doing something else in the future at some point. But it's great for now. Like, it is what it is. But I've talked to friends that carry a lot of stress, and I feel like I've been stressed to the point where it's almost like beyond that. It's like the other side, and it's just this like state of numbness, right? So I don't know. I don't want to keep talking in circles about it, and I'm hoping that maybe I learn a little bit more about myself and kind of like the source of all of that, and I don't know, maybe it's just going to need some more reflection or whatever. I think that the first thing that I think that there does need to be some sort of response to it, right? There needs to be some sort of action, even if you don't know the source. Like, if you feel the same way, or if I'm feeling this way, I need to, or you would need to, come up with some sort of plan to at least attempt. Like, it's that like scientist example, right? Do an experiment, change some of your variables, see what happens. Okay, what was the thing that happened to me? Okay, I didn't get enough sleep. Why? I was anxiety ridden and all that. Okay. Now, do you want to tinker around with pharmaceuticals? I mean, personally, I have no interest in that. And speaking to a psychiatrist and trying to get prescribed, I really have a lot of... I'm very apprehensive about that. And I know for some people it's like worked great. For me, I don't ever really want to put myself through that. I'm not ruling it out forever, but like, I sort of am. I'd much rather, probably, try CBD or something like that instead. But I even before that, though, I think sleep is going to be the key thing. So what I'm going to do, and I'll talk about this in the next podcast, just give you like an update, because I want to see how this works, because I'm at the midweek point this week. I'm going to, I hate saying it, I hate forcing myself to have to do this. I'm going to try one day this week with no caffeine, like a cold break. Now, my caffeine habit's been pretty rough. Like, I probably drink at least 3 cups of coffee a day. And, maybe a Diet Dr. Pepper. It's not like a good habit, but it definitely so I might have those 4 drinks in one day. And what I want to do is see, and maybe one day is not enough. I'm sure someone might say that, but I want to try one day. I want to do one day where I have 0 caffeine. and maybe I'm groggy and cranky and like kind of like a shitty person to be around, but I'll get through that day and hopefully be able to sleep a lot better. And that's going to be the little experiment that I play. And I want to see is it as simple as a caffeine related problem that like I've gotten into a pattern where I don't get enough sleep during the week. On the weekends I crash and sleep in, but then if you sleep in and then on a Sunday, you're going to stay up Sunday night, and it kind of leads me to this point. So maybe it's just something as simple as that. I'm going to start there. That's my little experiment. I think that there are larger things that cause this sense of dread before a work week starts. And it could be a lack of, an unhappiness. And I think part of that, is maybe the wrong expectations about your week. You lower your expectations, you're going to be let down less. It's not like a depressing thing to say that. It's just kind of like what it is, readjust what those expectations are, and so I'm going to start with the caffeine. I'm not going to try to do like 2 or 3 experiments today or this week, but the caffeine's going to be the first one. But eventually I'm going to try to put myself out there in some sort of uncomfortable social situation, like a meetup group or something like that. So that was the first thing that I wanted to get into today. I'm going to walk over here. That's why I love this portable setup. And I'm going to go grab this this Alan Watts book. This is from, and I think this book's a collection of essays from maybe different sources. So I don't know. I don't know. I didn't do my due diligence. But this is from his book, Does It Matter? Essays on Man's Relation to Materiality. So I want to read this excerpt and then kind of spend a few minutes getting into it. And I don't have a great Alan Watts voice, so apologies. Please check his stuff out. Check it out on YouTube. Try to find a video that doesn't... some of those videos with the inspirational music are cool, but try to find one without it, because I think you want to kind of hear the intonations that he meant, rather than some, like, dramatic crap in the back. Anyway, Alan Watts. The heart of the matter is that we are living in a culture which has been hypnotized with symbols, words, numbers, measures, quantities, and images, and that we mistake them for and prefer them to physical reality. We believe that the proof of the pudding is in the chemical analysis, not in the eating. This is largely the result of an educational system which is overwhelmingly literary and mathematical, which prepares everyone to be clerks and bureaucrats, and provides apprenticeship in arts of material competence only reluctantly for those considered too stupid for intellectual advancement. This is not sentimentalizing about the dignity of labor. It is saying that a culture is hardly a culture at all when it does not provide for the most sophisticated training in the fundamental arts of life: farming, cooking, dining, dressing, furnishing, and lovemaking. Where these arts are not cultivated with devotion and skill, time to spare and money to spend are useless. The shops are empty of all but trash, thrown together by slaves, working joylessly for cash with one eye on the clock. Thus, there are virtually no jobs to be had for those who delight in expert workmanship in producing the necessities of everyday life. The jet aircraft and scientific instruments are marvelous, but houses, cars, fabrics, bathtubs, carpeting, jewelry, suits, chinaware, beds, and lighting fixtures are simply phenomenal failures of human imagination. In the world of symbols and abstractions, understood in terms of separate and disjointed words, the human person is an isolated thing among other things. Oneself is therefore experienced as a lonely center of consciousness and action, living inside an envelope of skin. Ooh. A lot there, right? And that resonates. That's what's so great about Alan Watts. I mean, if you haven't ever looked into Alan Watts, it's definitely easier and more accessible to just like listen to one of his lectures, because he has such a way about him, and he's such an interesting personality, and he's got like a whimsical nature where he's I don't know, he's got this like great voice. He's like he's British, and I don't know, I got some British friends, but he talks in this kind of like it's like a joyous way. It's like this it's like he understands that everything is this big joke, right? And he's in on it, and he wants us all to be in on it, right? So it really puts people at ease. It puts me at ease when I do have those dread-filled Sunday nights. I mean, what I've done many times is play one of his lectures or something, and that's kind of the comforting thing that lulls me to sleep. So let's break down what he said here, and I'm not going to take too long doing this, but I do think it's really relevant. So he says, the heart of the matter is that we're living in a culture that's been hypnotized with symbols, words, numbers, measures, quantities, and images, and that we mistake them for and prefer them to physical reality. I mean, think about how profound that is. So he is talking about how we have analyzed things to this like abstract way, and have quantified it. And I love the imagery that he uses here. Maybe imagery is the wrong word. I love the word choices that he's used here to describe what this is, because I feel like it's so analogous to what's going on with like social media. You know, he wrote this, I don't even know when he wrote this. This is from Murder in the Kitchen, which was the essay that is in this book. So it's got to be from the early 70s. So he wrote this in the early 70s, and he's saying that back then they were living in a culture that was hypnotized with these symbols. Well, I think that's relevant now more than ever. You know, there's these symbols of status, you know, and they can be quantified with like literally with likes and views and attention. Attention is this like the new currency. And it's this thing that makes us feel good and ooh and ah, and it's not real. It's not a real thing. And so that's great, because Alan Watts is the best. So I just love how relevant that still is now. So he says, we believe the proof of the pudding is in the chemical analysis. Yeah, so yeah, in the analysis of all of this. And he's saying that it prepares everybody to be what? Clerks and bureaucrats. So why does he use those words, clerks and bureaucrats? Well, because, I mean, when you think about those types of professions, it doesn't like elicit images of people pursuing things that they love, right? It's this kind of like cold, you know, gray, cubicle type, you know, phony maybe for, you know, as far as bureaucrats, or materialistic maybe. You know, no one as a little kid is like, man, I can't wait to grow up one day and be a clerk, right? Hey, and you know what? You can be a clerk and be like the happiest person in the world. You really could. But I guess like our idea of what that profession is doesn't bring together these joyful images, and it certainly doesn't, like, it's not, I guess maybe his point for bringing it is it's like these aren't the types of jobs where you are going to have this intellectual curiosity and creativity. And I think for him that was always something that was really important. So he says this is not sentimentalizing, and believe me, I'm happy, I would think I pronounced that right, about the dignity of labor. It is saying that a culture is hardly a culture at all when it does not provide for the most sophisticated training. And then, of course, Alan Watts has just these farming, cooking, dining, dressing, furnishing, and lovemaking. I love how he throws that in there. So he's talking about like these very tactile things of like doing. He's talking about activities where things are done and created, and there's an action, and it's like a physical action. Like each one of those, farming, cooking, dining, dressing, furnishing, and lovemaking, all of those require like movement and action, and aren't this kind of like cold, distant clerk who, files papers, right? This is some sort of, actual action going on here. So the shops are empty of all but trash, thrown together by slaves working joylessly for cash with one eye on the clock. Well, that has never changed. I mean, you go into some of these, retail jobs or hourly locations, and you run across some people that, clearly just not stoked to be there, and maybe you feel that way yourself. You got one eye on the clock. You're not stoked. I don't know. I'm saying stoked a bunch. You're not happy to be there, and and the shops are empty of all but trash. I love that, because it's like, yeah, these stores it's just material things you don't really need, and it's all marketed to you like it's this thing, like, oh, buy all this, and it's just crap, right? I'm gonna go on a quick tangent. So I was in Target the other day, and I don't go to Target that often, but I happened to be in Target, and I had this moment of nostalgia. I was walking down the aisle, and there was this table set up, and it was like Detective Pikachu, and I was like, what is that? Because I don't know. I'm like a hermit. I don't like follow a lot of things going on. I rarely ever go to the movies. So Detective Pikachu is this new Pokemon movie that's coming out. Pokemon's like this throwback thing to when I was, a little kid. And anyway, they had like free Pokemon cards. They had like one special card anyway. So it was exciting for me. So I ended up buying like a little pack of like the Pokemon cards that they had there, and took them back and opened them, and it was fun. It was fun to do. And then you open them, you look at them, you're like, cool, all right, cool, and you set them down, and then now it's just this thing that you have, and you put them with the other things, and you just have these things. And now, with this specific example, I'll make the argument that, hey, this brought me joy, and it was bigger than just a thing. But for a lot of stuff that we purchase, and a lot of just things along this nature, I mean, what is that? I mean, it is literally kind of just like trash. Like, and then we spend our money on that, which our money is in some respect, our money represents time that we've given for this like thing that we exchange for this trash, and we earn that money while we're that unhappy person with one eye on the clock. And I mean, that's a common thing, so it's interesting. So yeah, thus there are virtually no jobs to be had for those who delight in expert workmanship in producing the necessities of everyday life. And this is where maybe I'll say I think those jobs are out there, and I think that the internet and social media and all of that, for all of the darkness and all of the negative things that I can be critical of about it, one of the benefits is like, hey, if you're this guy that you're an expert, what example did he use? You're an expert, let's say farmer. You're just this great farmer. You might be able to use those platforms for exposure for your thing, and then you start this little side thing, and you're really able to pursue something you love that just wasn't possible in the early 70s when he wrote this. So that might have changed a little bit. But what really stuck with me about all of this is this last little section here, is where he says, in the world of symbols and abstractions, still true today, understood in terms of separate and disjointed words, the human person is an isolated thing among other things. I love how he says understood in terms of separate and disjointed words, because it's like, for those kind of philosophically inclined, it's just this It's just great. It's just like poetry. Anyway, oneself is therefore experienced as a lonely center of consciousness and action living inside an envelope of skin. So I think that this kind of ties into what I was talking about in the first part, the first thing I wanted to bring up, where I had that feeling, a sense of dread, and that sense of dread led to the sense of, this anxiety, which led to lack of sleep, which led to the next day, this kind of dragging, but this overarching numbness that had been going on, right? Well, in a lot of ways, that could almost be like the loneliness that's going on in that isolated experience, which is, I mean, it's an isolated, lonely experience, right? It is like the thing of the human condition, I mean, it's literally Donnie Darko, everyone dies alone, right? Remember that quote from that movie that the old woman had on that piece of paper? I think, I don't know. I think she did. So, I don't suggest, and I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I'm going to be able to figure that mind fuck out. I don't think I will. But I think there's different ways to live, and there's a way to live with grace. I think that's maybe to live graciously. But the reason that his words, Alan Watts' words, resonate so much, even in 2019, and he wrote those, I'm bad at math, 40 years ago, almost 50 years ago. It's closer to 50. The reason that they resonate still is because I think those issues those cultural issues that he was noting have been things that have been prevalent in our society for a very long time. We've coveted the material things. We've come up with this system where we use money as this transactional item, because it's a lot better than bartering. So then it all becomes about this paper to get these things, but these things are just kind of just whatever, and right? So it's just this cyclical the loop that you could get caught in. Let me say that you could, right? Not everyone's caught up in this. Not everyone even thinks about this. Some people are just really happy, right? But other people like me kind of like overthink and analyze, and they get caught up in their heads. And so anyway, he gets to a lot of things in these essays, and I'm not doing him justice. So please check out Alan Watts. This is from his collection of essays called "Does It Matter?" This is specifically from the essay "Murder in the Kitchen." God, his quotes, they're just so fantastic. Here's a quick other one. Others, with their eyes fixed on the tomorrow that never comes, will bolt down all times present forever, along with a vitamin-enriched styrofoam called bread. By the stuff in the shin, most Americans are abstractionists. They hate material and convert it swiftly as possible into mountains of junk and clouds of poisonous gas. Ugh, God. Anyway, so I'm gonna part ways with you today with a little bit of positivity, because I read those kind of like critical sentences from Alan Watts. When you listen to him, he's just like such like a lovely human being, right? And he's very, very much like a positive voice. So one of the other quotes, and I talked about this in one of my blogs, one of the first one, second one, I don't know. And Alan Watts also says, join in the dance. It's a game. It is a game. And so my challenge to you, my challenge for myself, probably more so than anybody, is to start viewing things that way, is to not take myself so seriously, is to, not suppress my anxiety, but kind of just laugh through it. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, your job doesn't matter. It's not a bad thing. It's not saying that what you're doing isn't meaningful, because everything's meaningful in some sort of sense. Maybe, right? That's a philosophical conundrum. But in a larger sense, there's very little that we should be taking seriously. We should be taking seriously the suffering of others and those things, of course. But when it comes to our everyday jobs, when it comes to the day-to-day that on average most people experience, the most relatable issues that we deal with, it's not so serious. And for myself, it's going to start with trying to turn down the caffeine. Maybe for you, it might start with something else. But at the end of the day, don't be one of those people with an eye on the clock. Don't be one of the people collecting trash unless it's extremely cool promotional Pokemon cards that you can only get at Target. Instead, just join in the dance, man. Whatever that means. And read some Alan Watts, because he's fantastic. Anyway, that was another episode of the Wander and Reason podcast. Please, if you have not already, which right now you have to be checking out the website because this is where it is posted, but in the future the podcast will be available on iTunes and RSS feeds, so kind of everywhere where podcasts are. But please check out the blog. If you like it, share it. Check out the Instagram, like the Facebook page. I hate saying, hey, please like this thing. It's like such a pandering whatever. It's kind of just the reality, though, in today's day and age of building some sort of online presence. Because the idea at the end of this is for this thing to be something else, something different, something that is beyond the ordinary. Anyway, until next time, I will be checking in with you next week. Please be on the lookout for the blogs, which are posted every Wednesday and Sunday. I'm going to be sticking to Wednesdays and Sundays. The podcast, I'm going to say weekly. I might post this one tomorrow on Wednesday as well. I might wait till a little bit later in the week. Not sure, but I do want to try to at least keep somewhat of a weekly schedule with that. Anyway, till next time. Thank you.